Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about the saga of Rudy Giuliani on the losing end of a $148 million verdict in the defamation case brought by Shaye, Moss and Rudy Freeman. How much is that? Different ways to think about it, but here's one pretty vivid way. It's almost twice as much as they asked for. So the jury, which during deliberations had requested the information from the plaintiff's experts to try to value what it would take to compensate them for all the misery he had put them through, wound up just socking it to him as it seemed very possible that they might. People were, by and large, stunned at the amount of the verdict. And in a sense, it is stunning. On the other hand, so consider Giuliani himself didn't testify and had no defense at all. Now, he didn't testify. His lawyer said, oh, he didn't testify because he didn't want to put these poor women through any more misery, like, of listening to Giuliani in the stand. That sure sounded like a line, and I think the jury took it that way. Giuliani said he didn't do it because he thought that and he had promised, of course, that he would, and then the whole truth would come out. Giuliani said he didn't do it because the judge would have just held him in contempt, or otherwise, if he'd made any mistake, had really punished him, it wouldn't have done him any good. That is, another kind of absurd explanation. I think it's pretty clear why he didn't. He would have really been eviscerated on cross-examination. There's just so many lies that he's told, not just here. I mean, this whole one starts out, you'll remember, and Moss and Freeman will never forget, with a completely baseless accusation that they're taking a suitcase full of ballots and moving it around. And then he added gratuitously and with, racist tints, that they're handing something to one another. It turns out to be, I think, a breath mint or something, but that it's drugs. The results, of course, which came through in the trial, were just hellacious. A torrent of racist and other abusive communications. Their son, here's a detail that came out in the trial, their son couldn't use his cell phone because it was completely full with vicious comments from strangers. So all the information had come out. But so back to Giuliani. I mean, the plaintiffs put on a case with the very effective and kind of heartrending testimony of Moss and Freeman and how their lives had been ruined. But they also had an expert who could, have been matched at a minimum by an expert for Giuliani, saying, no, this is wrong, or this isn't how you evaluate it. Maybe because he really doesn't have any money whatsoever. I mean, it's just unclear whether he's impoverished or destitute, but he, has no evidence of having any funds at all. And the reason he was found guilty here, and this trial was just about damages, he'd already been found guilty by the judge, basically as a sanction for just continuing to defy discovery rulings by the court. And at a certain point, you can just say that, you assume they'll cut against him. But after giving ample warnings, he never in particular gave any information about his net worth, holdings, etc., which is, consistent with a big bankroll, hidden away in the Cayman Islands, and is consistent with his not having enough for subway fare. And it's just a complete mystery. And now back to Giuliani, even though, he's completely without any defense at all, he nevertheless continued to have press comments. He defamed them again, basically saying that they had rigged the election. And after the verdict, after he is mauled by a $148 million verdict, which he calls absurd, He says, he doesn't regret anything. The real problem was he wasn't given an opportunity to present any evidence, which is just a bizarre lie. He had all kinds of opportunity that he declined to present. And his nastiness and kind of sinister quality was much on display, but as was a kind of head scratching, what is the story with this guy who's turned into a serial liar, by many accounts, a really prolific drinker. They have many accounts of people in the Oval Office where he's got alcohol on his breath. He seems like, just a complete train wreck of a guy. Now, what are his shots going forward? Is all what happens now? Because it seems like a big verdict, but there's a few things. So first, when there are very big verdicts like this in favor of plaintiffs, people often think the prospects are strong that a court of appeals would reduce them. It's in legal terms called a remitter, because they would hold that a certain amount of the verdict is the subject of prejudice rather than sober consideration of the evidence. And as just to hold up, this is what they asked for, this is what they got, seems like that's a possibility here. On the other hand, he gave nothing. The only evidence they had to go on about things he said were things that the plaintiffs themselves had presented. So a court of appeals, typically can say, in light of the evidence on the other side, it wouldn't have been rational, etc. Here, it's not so easy. The number is very big, and we shouldn't be surprised if it's reduced. But the jury did break it down. Basically, each woman got a $16 million or so as compensation for the damage to reputation, $20 million for pain and suffering. And then they socked him for $75 million, which normally would be designed to punish based on his net worth, but nobody knows his net worth. So on what basis could that be reversed? His prospects for winning that kind of partial reversal on appeal are much diminished, given that he gave the jury literally nothing to go on. A court of appeals, nevertheless, could say something like, it just feels a little bit excessive, but so that's one possibility. But, from 148 to 100 or 75 feels like it doesn't matter unless, as I say, Giuliani has $100 million socked away in the Cayman Islands somewhere. It seems like they're unlikely to get anywhere near the full verdict. And that's the real second point here, is collecting. You can have a big verdict, and yet that doesn't mean that you can collect it. We're seeing this in the Alex Jones case, where it feels brazen. Jones is dodging creditors while eating luxury meals and still making money. Giuliani, I don't know what his prospects are if he has no money now to go on. Everybody notes he's got an apartment, and that's been on the market for $6 million or so. He could declare protection under bankruptcy laws. And when you do that, you get to keep a few things, but guess what you don't get to discharge? These kinds of verdicts, for intentional conduct. So he would still owe them, in theory, even if he comes forward and says, I have $500 million in debt and and $1.50 to my name. He's still in debt to them for $148. Now, if he declares bankruptcy, a bankruptcy court could say, all right, he owes these guys $148, he owes these guys so much and so much, and they put a plan together. Surely that plan would consist of less than $148 million for Moss and Freeman. But it might be, again, if we're dividing up, $100,000 or the proceeds from a sale of his apartment, and as long as he gets someplace to live, it's still not very much money for them. Plus, by all accounts, his strategy for a while has just seemed to be to kind of, be contemptuous and just not comply with anything until almost a literal, not just proverbial gun is at his head. You can imagine this going on appeal, affirmed, again on appeal, or to the Supreme Court, certiorari denied. And then you actually have to undertake another action to make a collection that if you win it, somebody will, a marshal will come to Giuliani's door the way somebody can be kicked out of the apartment, and you put a padlock on and you take the possessions and you sell them. That seems to be what we're talking about. So the first problem is it may be reduced by a court of appeals, but not enough that it would really matter. I think the second one, though, is real. How much money will they really see from Giuliani, especially if, as it seems to all appearances, he basically doesn't have any at all. And so at the end of the day, and that day is not over for them yet, they may be left really with not a lot at all. As for Giuliani, he now has to face trial on similar charges in Fulton County, except these could result in his getting a long prison sentence. So it's the same sort of thing. Fani Willis has already said she was not going to offer him a deal, and it makes sense in a way, because even if he had truthful testimony to provide, if he's got videotapes of Donald Trump saying, "Okay, I want to, storm the Capitol and create an insurrection," fine, but he doesn't. And as a witness, he's really next to worthless, because he's his whole long pattern of lies after lies these last several years means he's just not credible. So he's really just, defenseless in an open field now, financially, and perhaps soon to be with respect to his liberty. And just, it's really sort of how low can he possibly go? But to have gone through this whole proceeding and basically done nothing by way of defense is irrational, for starters. And the only way to begin to make some sense out of it is if he's basically already a pauper. So the road to collection for Moss and Freeman is not complete. It still could be sort of long. He's, I think, 80 now, and who knows what his life expectancy is. But he's going to do whatever he can to just, including denying court orders, to try to keep from the absolute reckoning day. And so the whole thing, there's a kind of, justice and exaltation that people felt when the big verdict came down against him. Their attorneys had said, send a message, and they certainly did. But there are frustrations now, I think, on the horizon until they see anything close to the award that the jury provided. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.